Now we have the period of the coronavirus. What does it reveal? Because when you look what is happening in the world in connection with it, what are the implications? What are the interactions? What are the individual reactions? Then you can realize that this is something to learn from, something to ripen through, something through which we individually and collectively has to learn, has to realize that only by facing the truth, facing the reality the way it is, we are able to live in a healthy way, we are able to live in a harmonious and joyous way. One of the most direct and deep aspects which through this coronavirus and the reactions which are coming up in human beings is revealing is the fear of death. It is touching the fear, it is bringing into the fact of the transitoriness of our life, bringing us to confront the fact that any moment everything can change, every moment the death can come. Everybody knows it in a kind of latent way somewhere. It is not any new information. But when you look in our life, we invariably tend to push aside this fact and go on living as if it is only for somebody else, as if it is only somebody else's reality. One doesn't have that problem. And the more we avoid facing the reality, the more one-sided our life becomes, the more split, the more superficial, the more unauthentic. Because when you are avoiding to confront an aspect of the reality which is part of your reality, which is part of life, which is there, and pretend as if it is not there, then in some way you are already going on in a kind of conflict. You are already trapped in fighting with something which you don't want to feel, which you don't want to see, which you don't want to recognize. But the fear is there, the undercurrent anxiety is there. In this kind of a situation where it is not only an epidemic proportion but more of a pandemic proportion, where it's a global phenomena, we are suddenly confronted with the fact that how everything is interconnected. How something which starts in some part of the world can spread so quickly and can change the whole way of living, the whole way of going about. It can affect the economy, it can affect the social living, it can affect many habits. It changes, in a way, every area where we often are going so unconsciously and automatically. That is what those who are insightful have been always saying. While you are not having all these challenges, not having all these problems, face the reality. Confront the facts of life. But it is the human tendency to overlook or to look away, to hold to that what is pleasant and convenient and ignore and go about life as if other things don't exist. It is not coming from our deeper consideration or understanding. It is more like a unconscious automatic reaction. And that is where we are, in a way, forced by nature through the developments, what is happening in and around us, to look at the reality. It is a bit interesting how in different traditions there are indications about the need to confront the reality coming into indications. For example, in some mystical traditions they say, face the death before you die. Die before you die. It means face the fear. Face all what is connected with who you are. Bring it into the conscious level and become aware of that what is part of death and that what is beyond death. In our normal way of going, we are very much identified with the body, with the personality, and don't consciously take initiative to feel and experience who we really are behind all this outer layers of our reality. The body is born and it will die. So the death is part of the body. The personality comes into manifestation and it will also dissolve and disappear. But when you start looking, you will be surprised and you will start discovering another dimension of your reality. That is when you have the chance to recognize that you are in the body, you have this personality, but you are not just this body, you are not just this personality, you are the one who is living in this body. You are the one who is behind all the aliveness in this body. And that can only be experienced when you are taking the initiative to confront the truth. So because we get so preoccupied and engaged in the peripheral aspects of life without considering life as a whole, we remain living in fear. We remain almost like a slave of the fear. And that is not a healthy basis for a human being to be here, because when you let fear be your master, that means you are not able to look deeper. You are not able to face the reality the way it is. And the consequences are very drastic. You can understand somebody only in a deeper way when you can look beyond your fear and consider the state of the other. In fact, you understand yourself also only in the right and deep way when you also begin to confront your fear. When you see that you can observe the reaction of fear without identifying with it. When you realize that you, as a human being, has a unique capacity of consciousness which makes it possible for you to face all these things and also gives you the chance to look directly and deeply into the nature of the reality. That is how the real understanding can happen in our life. But we don't realize the need for it, we don't realize the urgency for it, and most of the time the education, especially in the modern world, has been focusing on the utilitarian aspect, on the material aspect, on the visible aspect, without considering the deeper and hidden aspects of the reality which are decisive in the long run. So when there is fear, now you can see in this situation where the coronavirus is spreading, there's so much panic reactions. I was just telephoning with a friend who had been in Italy and who had come back, and he was calling and he said he's so happy to be back here because he couldn't believe what's happening to human beings. People are buying anything and everything and accumulating and reacting in such ways that he has not seen such things before. And it is the unconscious way of our reaction. Out of fear, we go more into the animal level of reacting. Only when you can watch your fear and give room for your intelligence, you give space so that you can consider and look at not only that what is coming up as fear, but also what are the other aspects of the reality. And you are able to see the other aspects of the reality only when you can watch the fear without identifying with it. And this is very, very important to understand it. And this is what makes human life so deeply significant. Because different than the other animals, the human being can observe one's own reactions. And due to this capacity to observe one's own reactions, we can decide, use our fantasy, use our intelligence, use our creative potential and see what is the right answer to the situation, what is good, what is loving, what is really healthy. Because as a human being, we are able to see that we don't need to just shrink into a narrow idea of ourselves and close ourselves up out of fear. We don't need to get encapsulated more and more. On the contrary, we can look what are intelligent ways to answer to these challenges. And the beauty of life is when we are confronting and considering like that, you see that there are possibilities. Life has created possibilities. Life has made it possible that we can go through challenges and ripen through it and find solutions which are valuable for everybody. Without this deeper consideration, it is everybody on an egoistic level, in a narrow level, caught in the identification with the body and the personality, trying to save the so-called self. And it is a very hard way of reacting. I heard that in some places they were creating barricades, I think it was in Ukraine, and hitting at the buses because there were people coming from China who were Ukrainians living in China, and they were coming back, and because of the fear they didn't want them to come there. And I even heard of another situation which was even more extreme, where just because somebody was from China and these people who were encountering this situation were so afraid, rather than trying to look how to take care and help and protect themselves and each other, they were killing this one person. This is not coming from our intelligence. This is not understanding. This is just blind, animal-like reaction. And it is high time that we wake up and realize that we as human beings need to face the reality. We need to understand ourselves and the reality more deeply. And that is the only way we can go through all the different challenges which we are facing on every level and find solutions which are valuable for everybody. But going on in the narrow egocentric level, blindly reacting, behaving like an animal, we can be very destructive, very foolish, very childish, and it is not coming from our intelligence. It is not coming from the right understanding. So it is a very important thing for human beings to realize that the real steps to encounter and answer to the global challenges and the individual process what is connected with it can be healthy only when you bring the attention to understand who you really are, what you really are. When you learn to look at yourself without identifying with your reactions, when you begin to confront the process of the fear, when you begin to confront your desires and dreams, your greed, your settled ideas about who you are, what you are, about your pride and your prejudice, what it does, about all the beliefs which you carry, which often are not based on the reality, but which are just concepts which you have picked up as a part of your conditioning. it requires a very courageous and careful confrontation with the reality. And that is what will give us the right relaxation, the right easiness to deal with the situations humanly, healthily, gracefully, intelligently. These challenges, when it is rightly confronted, will make us more human, more aware of the sacredness of life, the divinity of this creative process, the wonder that life really is. Otherwise, we are so much preoccupied with the conditioned idea of ourselves and the concepts and beliefs which are connected with it, trying to hold, trying to settle, trying to defend things which is not coming from the right understanding. We are more concerned about our image. We are proud. We are going in ways as if we are only just this body. But that's not the truth. That is why it is necessary to consider this kind of challenges which are coming very, very carefully and honestly, and learn the lesson which we need to learn through it. In the Zen tradition, there is a story about 4 kinds of horses. The first kind of horse moves only when it gets beaten with the whip. It is referring to different kinds of human approaches, human tendencies. Some people only consider and look carefully when there is suffering, when they don't consider in other situations, when the suffering is not yet there, when you know that nature has its ways, life moves in a certain way. But when we are not ready to learn, when we are not ready to consider and confront and wait for it to become a problem, and only when the suffering is there, then start looking. It is just like somebody who is living in a house of wood. Going carelessly about the possibility of fire. If the person does not even know where the water connection is, where the fire extinguisher is, where the telephone number is to call the fire department, where the telephone is placed in the house, when the person is not at all considering and preparing oneself, when the fire is suddenly there, then it is very dangerous. It can burn the whole house very easily. Many people don't consider life for what it really is, gone in a certain one-sided way of looking, and don't take the initiative to understand. This is what in the Zen tradition they call the first horse, which moves only when it gets the pain, when it gets the hit from the whip. But the different horse, they say, is a little bit more alert. It doesn't need to get the whole pain. Just getting touched from the whip, it becomes alert. This is where it is going. and it starts moving. It is referring to those kind of people who don't need to get into suffering, but who, when they see that it is very close, and if we don't take the right steps in the right moment, it can drown us, it can become pain, it can become suffering. The third kind of horse is even more alert, more sensitive. It just needs to see the whip, and then it starts moving. That is referring to those fewer group of people, fewer individuals who are going more carefully in life, considering life, confronting the issues. And they are alert about it, that life is a passing phenomenon. What we call our so-called I is a passing phenomenon. This body, this personality is there, but you cannot settle in it, you cannot hold to it. It is born and it will die. So, once you understand it, then you see that it is our responsibility as a human being towards ourselves to inquire, to confront the issue of who we really are, what is our truth. Otherwise, we are trying to settle with things where we cannot settle. And the fourth kind of horse, they say, is the horse which needs only to see the shadow of the whip. These are even more rare human beings who, from the smallest experiences they make, the smallest pain, consider carefully and come to the recognition that it is necessary to inquire and go deeper into understanding life, into experiencing the reality the way it actually is. And experiencing the reality or understanding life is not collecting information about and around the life. It is very different. It is a direct inquiry to experientially understand what is the nature of our body, what is the nature of this personality, and who we really am. One of the great seers from the last century was Ramana Maharshi, and his whole teaching was around just this one factor. He reminded everybody, whatever different kind of problems and challenges they came to him, he said, first, go deeper. Ask the question, who am I? And all the answers which the mind is producing, you know that that is not it. It's not a information which you have to collect about yourself. It is not something which is about and around what you collect on a logical, rational way, what will help you. When all these logical, rational explanations are confronted and put aside, and when you are with the quest, being wakeful, being present, in that state of intense questioning, without clinging to words, as the mind becomes silent, experience that what is. Because that what you are is not some explanation, it is not some word. And that is what you can directly experience in the state of the inner silence. This is very, very important to realize that the crisis which we experience in different areas, whether it is in the form of the coronavirus or in the area of climate change or the other ecological problems, we are able to find healthy, intelligent solutions and bring it into implementation only when we ask the basic questions and get familiar with who we really are, what we truly am, and realize also what is our need and what is only a idea produced in the mind which we are often running behind without realizing that that cannot give us the fulfillment which we are seeking. So this crisis with the coronavirus is touching this, and those who are ready to learn, they don't need to fall into suffering. Those who are ready to question and confront, they will see that it is time to really understand who we are, what we are. And from this deeper understanding and consideration, live gracefully, live joyously, live spontaneously in a fulfilling way. Because when you are connected with the reality, your response will be spontaneously of an intelligent nature. It will lead you to the good. It will open you the possibility of love. That is why those who have been insightful have been reminding, awaken to the reality, awaken to the truth, awaken to your true nature. Ask who you really am. Realize your true self. Different ways of pointing out. There are so many things spoken, written, said, discussed about this nature of the reality. But that is not enough. And many of you have read and listened and discussed all these things. But the decisive factor is that you need to directly experience that what you are. Directly experience the reality the way it actually is. That you awaken to the wonder of this reality, you awaken to the blessedness of this reality, you awaken to the Creator and the nature of the creation within and without. We are often not aware how peripherally we are going about life. Just the other day I was giving a friend an example. For example, when somebody is planting an apple seed and a plant rises and it becomes a tree, it bears flowers, brings fruits and tasty, fragrant apples are coming, which is very nourishing. What we mostly say is, look, my apple tree, look what I have made. We are more proud about our achievement in bringing up this apple tree. But what we invariably don't bring into consideration is the fact, how come this little seed is carrying all this potential in it? How come this little seed, when it comes in touch with the earth, comes in touch with the right warmth and humidity, is beginning to sprout, becoming a plant, opening up? And out of this small little seed, something so miraculous is happening. We have become unaware, indifferent to the wonder, the miracle, which is happening every moment in our life. And we have become preoccupied with a layer of man-made concepts and thoughts. And that is what is invariably behind the sufferings which is happening individually and collectively. All these wars going on, all this insensibility towards those who are weak, towards children, towards women, towards those who are helpless, is only possible because we don't understand what we are. We don't realize this interconnectedness. When you are in touch with yourself, you will be naturally good because your innermost nature is connected with the source. Your innermost nature is good. And this is what will come into your own experiential understanding. And that is what makes a difference. Words which you discuss, speak, philosophize, that's all about and around. It is like people who are hungry are discussing menu cards and cookbooks. The hunger is satiated only when the person prepares the food and takes it. It is something like that. You need to experientially understand what you are, who you are. Nothing less than that will do. So, rather than lamenting and just shrinking and going into blind reactions in the wake of these challenges and pressures, be ready to understand life, be ready to learn, be ready to awaken, to see the truth, to see the reality the way it is, to experience who you truly am and experience the blessedness of life.